Hi, I'm Sam Fessich from the EduMagic Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Dan Granger. Dan has coped with seasonal affective disorder every winter since he was a child, growing up in Wisconsin. Today we're focused on learning about seasonal affective disorder and Dan's book, Why is Sam So Sad? Seasonal Affective Disorder and Depression from a Child's Perspective. So much to learn, so much to understand. Thanks for listening. And by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you helped out the podcast. And here are a couple ways you could. One, you could tell a friend and share the links. Two, you could go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And three, you could click on the link on my website homepage that says, Buy me a coffee. By doing this, you could donate $5 or more. What do you think? That'd be so cool. You'd help me address the different costs for producing the podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Enjoy the show.
So Sam goes through depression, and depression for children with SAD lasts from the beginning of fall to later part of winter. And the worst parts are during January and February. Those are the peaks.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Dan Granger has coped with seasonal affective disorder, SAD, every winter since he was a child growing up in Wisconsin. As a former teacher of 15 years, he combines his professional experiences and personal background to deliver an informative and inspiring children's book, and it's called Why is Sam So Sad? Seasonal Affective Disorder and Depression from a Child's Perspective. The son of an accountant and salesman, he received his bachelor's degree from University of Wisconsin Oshkosh Special Education, LDED, and earned a master's degree from University of Northern Arizona for early childhood education. His adventurous side has been served by scuba diving in Jamaica, mountain bike down the hills of Park City, Utah, jumping out of a plane twice, hiking from the bottom of the Grand Canyon to the top of Mount Humphreys, and then hiking to the top of Mount Timpanogos in Utah. He also jumped into the freezing cold waters during the polar plunge. Our focus today will be talking about seasonal affective disorder and Dan's book, Why is Sam So Sad? Seasonal Affective Disorder and Depression from a Child's Perspective. Dan, thanks so much for being on the show, and say hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? I'm doing great.
Well, it's awesome to have you here. And let's talk about a couple of things. Now, you were a special ed teacher for 15 years. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, I was. I've been, within the special ed, within my life, I was special ed. And then I decided I've always wanted to be a teacher. And when I was learning in college, it was kind of like looking at myself from dissecting myself, which is very interesting. But because I had that perspective, I became a better teacher. And I student taught in elementary and junior high, and then a little bit for special ed itself. But let me tell you, and every special ed teacher will tell you the same thing. Those IEPs are a killer. And in order to be a special ed teacher, you have to have a special ed heart, which I do. You also have the education, which I do. And then you also have that lawyer side. And that's the IEP. And that's what killed me. And that's what got me out of special ed. However, I found my niche in early childhood in preschool.
Gotcha. So, one of the things you also did was you trained to be a reading specialist. Tell us about that journey.
I did train to be a reading specialist. And in the process of doing that, I learned, skills that helped me with struggling readers and encouraged readers and got them to be more confident in what they can do. And I don't know, I really liked being a special. I liked learning. It's just the applying part that's kind of tougher. But they say everybody can be a teacher or whatever. Everybody can learn something. I can't remember. Or if you can't do it, you end up being a teacher, something like that, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that.
Right. That's a popular tune, but doesn't play out usually. So
Very true. Very true.
So what's it now? You have something special that you have to contend with that really kind of interfered with your being able to kind of pursue that reading specialist. What is that? What is that was interfering with you?
My disability, as far as learning disability, my math killed me because those word problems were killer because I dealt with a little bit of reading here and there. That wasn't my disability itself. My disability was math. And even worse yet was flipping, sometimes I flip the numbers around, but my disability was learning step-by-step order. And so you can imagine how word problems were a killer. And even today, like certain things, like just doing certain things with step-by-step is just, for some reason, it's hard for me. But for reading, no, that wasn't an issue. In fact, I became a really good reader because I tried to keep up with my brother, who was a really super fast reader, but that's a different story.
So now one of the things that I understand that you have to contend with is you also you might drop things or something like that. So how does that play in?
Just basically being clumsy when I was younger. So I kind of chose never to really be, it's not necessarily a bad thing or good thing, but while being kind of clumsy, I kind of was like, well, I don't want people to rely on me as much. So I didn't necessarily take on as many kind of things that I possibly could. Like I've never once been a boss. I've been the go-to for the boss, which is I will train anybody you have in front of me. That's my goal. I've always been good at that. Anytime somebody new came, give them to Dan, he'll train them up really good, and then that's fine. But as far as actually having the boss role and having, consequences fall on me, I knew that because I'm clumsy in a way, and my body wasn't really, I don't want to say that. I wasn't disformed or anything, but it just, sports weren't my thing. We'll put it that way. I ended up with drama and choir. So
that's pretty cool. No, a drama and choir, there's nothing. I'm a former band guy, and I also, as a teacher, sponsored theater. So good stuff. All right. I appreciate you sharing, and I want to make sure
it's been a pleasure.
So Dan, let's get into your book. It's called Why is Sam So Sad? Seasonal Affective Disorder and Depression from a Child's Perspective. So what is seasonal affective disorder?
So seasonal affective disorder is when somebody gets depressed during the winter months, and that is because of lack of sunlight and vitamin D in their body.
Gotcha. So talk a little bit about, this is, let's talk about Sam for just a minute. All right.
Gladly.
Who is Sam in the book, and what's going on with Sam?
So give me a second. I got a couple things to show you. This is going to kind of stink for those who can't see it, but so first off, I will show you that Sam has trouble being happy all the time. And when he's happy all the time, he looks kind of like that. However, there's times when Sam feels sad. Also, I got my shirt that says it too. Anyways, so since there's a happy time because I'm doing an interview, I'm going to put on my happy hat. So Sam goes through depression, and depression for children with SAD lasts from beginning of fall to later part of winter. And they go through, and the worst parts are during January and February. Those are the peaks. And things that he goes through is pushing family away, pushing his friends away, things like that. And the reason I wrote the book is to have people understand why they're being pushed away. Not everybody, if Sam were to be a new friend and push him away and they didn't know he had this, well, then that's a casualty. Then you just lost that friend. My good friends know that, yes, I do push them away at this point in time, and I'll come back and, but they also know that the thing about SAD is you want to make sure that you're getting the child or whoever has SAD out and not isolated, because when they're isolated, their thoughts take over, their negative thoughts take over, and that's not good.
So now, before we go any further, and by the way, that was, I have an audio podcast, so they couldn't see, but Dan has a cool hat that it's bright orange on one side and has a happy Sam, and on the other side, when he turns it inside out, it's dark with sad Sam. And so tell me why you wrote "Why Is Sam So Sad" as a children's book.
So as an adult or growing up, I've kind of always seen myself as like a Peter Pan kind of guy. I've always related better with children than to adults. I mean, I kind of have that adult part of me, but I also have that more that playful. At parties, get-togethers, I was always hanging out with the kids. So I've wanted to write a book forever. I mean, it's something people want to do. And how I got into it was the company that I currently work at during COVID for the first 2 years. I was working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. During that time, I wasn't able to see the sun. So before I went to work, the sun had not risen. And by the time I left work, the sun had already set. So for 2 years, I lost out on seeing the sun. And I was also in artificial lighting for those 2 years. So while I was at work, I was thinking really bad thoughts. I was the lowest I possibly ever have been, including the fact that I was planning leaving this world. In the process of leaving this world, I was thinking, you know what, maybe some other people are feeling this way too. So I wrote a book about it. And I wrote a book within the children's perspective because I don't think people know that this is something that people have, even though 5% of the population do have SAD. And there's millions of people in America that have SAD. It's not as common for adults, or it's not as common for children. It's more so for women. They get it 3 out of 4 times versus men. SAD is something that people need to talk about and people need to know, because some child could be, or teen or whoever could be going through this rough patch and pushing people away. And teachers and counselors and principals and schools need to know that, this person needs help.
Gotcha. So what's it feel like to have SAD? How's it come on you? I mean, what's it feel like?
Well, all the things in the book, let me show you here. Can you see it?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, so there he is. All the things in the book that Sam goes through, I personally have gone through. I am Sam, Sam is me. And the worst part is, the negative thoughts. And the negative thoughts lead to not being able to sleep. So there's actually 2 kinds of SAD. So the first kind of SAD, which is what's SAD that 90% of the people have out of the 10%, which I'll get to that too. So the first kind of SAD is winter SAD, which is what I wrote about, which is what I deal with. In Wisconsin, where I'm from, the weather changes all the time. The joke is, if you don't like the weather, it'll change. And if you do like the weather, too bad, it'll change. When I lived in Arizona, I came back to Wisconsin, and it kind of reminded me of the villain who cackles and be like, haha, I remember you, and this is going to come back to haunt you. And so SAD is definitely dealing with depression and dealing with the lack of eating, possibly. But winter SAD, basically, if you can think of a bear in hibernating, what do? Well, they overeat, they oversleep. In fact, people with SAD are 2.5 hours of sleep extra compared to somebody who does not. And so they overeat, they oversleep, and they binge on, they binge on comfort foods, starches, or like starchy stuff and sugary stuff and all kinds of things like that. So for me, I dealt with trying to go to bed, but I read like crazy because I tried to put good thoughts in my head before I went to sleep. Or I even ended up watching TV. I remember one of the teachers was like, I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that the other day on David Letterman. I know I just aged myself. And they're like, what were you doing up watching David Letterman. And I was in junior high. I'm like, well, too bad I can't go to sleep.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's there's a sure sign of it there. Hey, Dan, so let's talk a little bit about what can be done to treat seasonal affective disorder. What do you think?
Yeah, in order to treat seasonal affective disorder, there are four main things that you can do. There is medication, which is basically antidepressants, which you need a doctor to prescribe, or psychologist or somebody in the medical field to prescribe for you. You also can use light therapy, believe it or not. So people stare at a special light that is, it's equal to the sun, which is 10,000 lux or higher, which is somewhere between like 10,000 lux and 50,000 lux. So if you think about like a cloudy day and seeing the sun, you get the rays in the cloudy day, that would be about 10,000 lux. And then like a pure sunny day is like 50,000 lux. So somewhere in there, if you want to buy one of those lights, that's something that that's one of the requirements that you really want to look for as far as getting a light. There's also something called a sunrise light, which is basically like the light produces a sunrise in your dark room. So there are clocks like that, there are lights itself. And so when you wake up to the light itself. You wake up to the dawn itself, or not dawn, but I mean the sunrise itself. I'm sorry. And then there also, believe it or not, you can actually get glasses that do the same thing. I've just saw it on Amazon. I've only heard about it. Pretty interesting. And then, so those are the two things. And then the next one would be psychotherapy, which deals with cognitive behavioral therapy. And that was basically dealing with a problem little by little and introducing the problem to the patient. And in this case, it would be somehow with dealing with depression and SAD. So if you think about spiders, you would think of like seeing a picture of a spider. And then the next thing would be watching a really quick video of a spider. And then the next one would be actually going and seeing a live spider. And then the next one would be possibly touching the spider or letting it walk on you or whatever. And so little by little, that kind of therapy really works well with not only adults, but children too. There's a modified kind of therapy for children and teens that works really well. The last one, of course, is vitamin D. You can actually take that vitamin D from the pharmacist and you can decide how much you want. Obviously, you should consult your doctor to see so you don't go over. But I take vitamin D, and when I know winter's coming and the SAD months are coming, I kind of up the dosage to just get it into my system at first. And then as the days get brighter and brighter, I lessen what I need to take. But there you go. So like I said, antidepressants for medication, light therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and vitamin D. That's what I would say are the main things, and that's what my research has shown.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. So one of the things I want to make sure that I ask you, so would it help if you like had if you did office work, if you had a big window that allowed natural light in, would it help to do that? Or is that just, does it just depend, or is it not really a factor like that? I mean,
natural lighting is the best you can possibly have. In fact, what they talk about is in my research, it said that the light box itself, the therapy is equal to like a cloudy day. So you still get the sun or just, and then if you keep doing this over and over again, they talk about how many, like the correct wattage or whatever. And if you do it more and more, it's like having a sunny day. But what you really want to do is you want to be outside. The more you can exercise, the better off you're going to be. The more you're outside, the better you can be.
Gotcha. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure I mentioned is that having SAD encouraged you to become a special education teacher. Could you talk about that?
Sure. Actually, as far as, basically my whole life has been being an underdog and being told I couldn't do things. So SAD is just one more thing. Special ed is just one more thing. When I was younger, I had Jacksonian epilepsy, which deals with seizures. And my mom believes that I was born in a seizure because when I was first born, I didn't make a sound. The doctor put me on the cold metal table, and I screamed, and then he picked me up and I peed on him. So he's like, "Okay, your kid's fine." uh, as far as special ed and SAD, I've always just wanted to be there and help people. That's my number one thing. I've always been a helper. If I can help people in some way, it's been a good day. And so by going through what I've gone through as an educator, as a student, I was able to work with others and give them some hope. And when I went to the special ed classes and I worked with special ed kids, they were like, "Wait a minute, you're a teacher. How can you have this? How can you have what I have? How can you be good? How can be?" And I'm like, "That's exactly it. You just have to work for it, and this can be yours. You can be successful too." And the problem with special ed is there's not a lot of people out there that understand that the worst part of the special ed is you have to fail in order to get in. So you have to fail being in the regular classroom in order to get in. So obviously by the time you get in, you're ticked off, you're frustrated, you're depressed, you're like, why am I here? And that teacher, that very first time that kid comes in, you just have to know that background's like, okay, they have some baggage. And I wish there was another way to do it, but there's not.
So tell me, what did COVID do? How did it make things worse?
COVID made things bad because you couldn't go outside, and not being able to go outside, whenever you're not able to go outside, you cannot get those demons of moving around. You can't get those negative demons out of your head. And, all the fun things you would do with like a family. I mean, you're still dealing with depression. You're still pushing people away, but now, instead of pushing them away and being able to go somewhere and kind of regroup or whatever, you're living with them. And it wasn't really good. Actually, as far as, again, in my research, the depression and anxiety went up in teens and adults during that time.
Oh, so, yeah, it definitely did.
Yeah, I think it doubled or tripled.
It's crazy. So I can only imagine that it would just make things so much worse if you already to be cooped up inside. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about, so why do you think teachers should get to understand what SAD is? I mean, why should they learn what the symptoms are? I mean, and have an understanding of it.
So what you want to think of is, as far as the symptoms, is the child or the teen or whoever is not their normal self. They've left kind of, they're not doing extracurricular activities. They're not, participating in class. They're late, usually extra sleeping in. It's hard to get up. It's hard to go to bed. It's during that time. Yeah. And so in order to work with somebody with SAD, just basically be there for them, remind them that, things are going to be okay, and check with them at all times, kind of keep them in reality. I know that some of the things that have been done, if you're a parent, grandparent, somebody's taking care of a kid, when there's a stoplight, everybody in the car says something they're thankful for. And I know my mom used to, during my SAD time, I would, talk all negative. And as soon as I got in the car, she's like, "Tell me one good thing. That's all I need. One good thing." And I'd have to tell her one good thing. And that was hard because, my mind's not thinking positive things. My friends, on the other hand, are like, "Hey, yeah, this is what Dan did." And then my mom would be like, "Okay, Dan, that's two things." I'm like, "What? How are you kidding? So yeah, I learned I can't pawn that off on somebody else. So yeah, just basically just being there for the kid, child or teen, or just being there for them and trying to support them the best they possibly can. So on the other hand, so we talked about winter sad, which is, thinking about a bear being hibernating. Summer sad, on the other hand, occurs during the summer and spring, which is surprising, but only 10% of the population does. They deal with agitation and possibly violence and lack of sleep versus oversleeping. And this happens more in the warmer environments, obviously. I personally don't have this, so I can't speak from experience on it, but when I was doing my research, I found that to be very, very interesting, that is something that actually exists.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for sharing. And, we're getting close to finishing up. And one of the things that I wanted to get you to do is tell our listeners where they can find additional information, connect, and learn more. Where you want to send them?
Yeah, actually, you're in luck. My website is finally done. Can't wait to talk about it. So it'll be dan/Granger.com. It's that easy. Lowercase d AN/GRANGER.com. So you can find it there. You can find my book at Barnes & Noble. You can find it at Amazon. You can find it wherever you look for books. I'm so proud of this book. Why is Sam so sad? Let's see. I'd like to show you a couple pictures. Can you see that picture?
Yes.
So during winter, during Christmas, I don't do well with Christmas. I don't do, everybody else deals with, I'm so excited about this, blah, blah, blah. But when, and I went through all that, the celebration part, but it still kind of was hard because when I didn't have school, and it's hard for special ed kids too, when they don't have that regimen structure, the regimented structure of school, it's not the best for them. In fact, like more crimes actually are committed, and they're just off, things like that. For me, I was more depressed, and I didn't have things to keep me busy, whereas school always got me busy. It always gave me a reason to get up, whereas during the break, I could sleep in forever, or stay up forever. And then I have another picture, which is one of my favorites, right there. You see that one? So when Sam's sad, he wishes he could fly away, and there's Sam actually in like a superhero suit, like flying away. And that's kind of the same thing when I'm going through this depression and things like that, or a child is, that's I wish I could go to someplace warmer. I wish I could be happier. And it's not just, in America. If this happens all over, somewhere else, I wish I could fly somewhere else. So like when America is dealing with their winter, Australia is dealing with their summer. So it would be nice to fly to Australia at that time.
Very much so. Thanks for sharing that. And I got to ask, so who did your illustrations? Did you do them, or did you have somebody else do them?
No, surprisingly, I got a company called Christian Faith Publishing. I was at work. I'm like, okay, I want to write this book. Actually, the story behind that is kind of interesting. So here I am, staring at my wall and feeling down and wanting to write a book. And I talked to a coworker who kind of just recently got there. Like I didn't, and I'm like, man, I wish I knew somebody who wrote a book and so I could do something. And surprisingly, she's like, yeah, my best friend just wrote a book. Here's her number, call her up. And here's a number, call her up, and she can tell you all about it. So she told me who she went with, and she went with another Christian company, and I called them, or so I thought I did, and I ended up with this company, Christian Faith Publishing. But it's been a journey. It's been interesting. It's been fun, and I'm thankful for what they did. Every step of the way was interesting. The first thing they do is, decide on the title and decide the picture of the title, and then they you have like 3 weeks of like formatting and looking at all the words and stuff like that. And then you picked out the pictures, and then you added the color to the pictures. And during this whole time, I would go to see my mom, and because she helped me with the book, and we would celebrate by going out to eat with any new thing that happened. As far as the book itself, when I revealed it to my family, my mom, it was a milestone birthday for my mom, and we were out of state, and I brought the books, and I wasn't sure how I was going to give this to them. So we were about to leave the hotel, and I'm like, and we were in a hurry. So keep in mind, I wasn't sure if I could do this. And we were in a hurry, and we're like, can I show you something? Do you have a second? And then I passed out all the books. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so awesome. Yeah. Then we went outside. Luckily, it was beautiful. It was a sunny day. In fact, we went to Maine, Bar Harbor, Maine. And in Bar Harbor, Maine is where the first sun sets in America. Or no, rises in America. So it was extra special to have that and the sun be a component to how I live. One of the things in the book that's very relatable to kids in regards to the sun is thinking of can you see that? No, there we go. Thinking of a battery. Yeah, so in that part, I showed this to my friend bought the book, and he showed this to his kid, who's actually a preschooler, which I had no idea that preschoolers would get my book. In fact, it's, from like elementary on to, prees and teens. And so he saw this battery, and he said, Dad, I'm not charged today. And another day he's like, Dad, I'm totally charged. And I'm like, oh my gosh, after I heard that, I was like, he gets it. He gets the book. That's so cool. And then I showed it until I talked to another friend of mine, and his kid was like, I don't get why, Sam's sad. Like, I'm happy all the time. I'm like, well, there you go. You're not part of the 5%.
Gotcha. So Dan, one of the things we're going to wrap up here now. And one of the things that I want to make sure that we remind everybody is that they can find out more information. They go to different sites. To find the book. And your website again is where?
Dan/Granger.com.
Very cool. So I'll make sure that's in the show notes. And Dan, thank you so much for talking with us and explaining seasonal affective disorder and sharing your book, Why is Sam So Sad? Seasonal Affective Disorder and Depression from a Child's Perspective. You have a great focus, and I'm wishing the best in all you do.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.